Hey guys, Mr. Bergman here with lesson number 2 for the equations unit. On Tuesday, you did your first lesson, which was adding and subtracting for the equations. And then on Wednesday, you got introduced a little bit more on Khan Academy videos and then some of the assignments that I assigned for the adding and subtracting of equations. So hopefully those went well, and hopefully you guys are asking questions as needed. Remember, you can email me and we can set up a time. I can answer questions on there, whatever needs to happen. But I'm make sure that you guys know that I'm available for you. So moving forward, lesson number 2, we have multiplication equations, and then right over here I have division equations. And when we get to that, I'll move the cart with the Chromebook on top of it, so you guys can see that too. But a big thing that we talked about on Tuesday was inverse operations, and that's the same thing. That's a very, very, very big thing for multiplication and division equations. It's just doing the opposite of what is happening here. So when we look at multiplication equations, just a quick thing that we need to talk about is seeing we have 2a equals 6. Now in algebra, a lot of times when a constant is placed next to a variable like this, they don't tell you what operation is really happening. And this is where the algebraic kind of operations come into play. Now, there's nothing in between these two, but a lot of times they don't place the dot. They don't put an X for multiplication in there because we don't want you to get confused about if it's a variable or if it's an operation. So a lot of times, like I said, they'll just put a constant next to a variable, and they just assume that you know that's a multiplication problem. Going forward, though, with this, remember we talked about balancing our equations here. And when we do that, you're going to be showing us how to do the inverse operation, which in this case is obviously division. Opposite of multiplication is division. So to get this 2 out of here so we can have our variable by itself on one side of this equation, we're going to divide. So we put a 2 there. And the same thing with the 6 on this side. Whenever you do to one side, you do to the other side to balance the equation. Moving forward here, 2 and 2 cancel each other. So we do have a by itself here. And then 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now, when we're looking at these, if you ever question yourself, you can plug 3 in for a. A equals 3. So if we plug that in and we put the equation back over here, hopefully you can see that. I know there's a little bit of a glare, but we're going to check our work here. And we take this 3 and we plug it in for 2. Does that equal 6? 2 times 3 does equal 6. So it does work. So checking your answer in some of these cases is a really, really good thing just to help make sense of what is happening. So if we look at this next one right here, we have 20 equals 4 times c. Opposite or the inverse operation would be to divide by 4 on both sides. And a 4 divided by 4, you probably are asking yourself, Mr. Bergman, that doesn't cancel it. That actually gives you a 1. Well, in algebra, if it gives you a 1, we don't actually write anything in front of a letter besides constants besides 1. So if it's a 1, one more time, if you have a 1 right here, you do not need to write it. Okay, there's always assume that there is a 1 in front of a variable, and we'll talk about that more in the division equations here. Anyways, 4 divided by 4 cancels, and you get a c, or you get your variable by itself, and then you have 20 divided by 4, which would be 5. Now, if we plugged 5 in for c, 4 times 5 would give us 20, so that definitely does work. I'm going to stop there with the multiplication. If you guys have questions, you can feel free to ask, but I'm going to move us over here. Let's see if I can get this right. To the division equations. Now, division equations are not any different than what you've been doing, but making sense of them does take a little bit more of a reach. So looking at this, you have a variable divided by a constant. We have m divided by 6 equals 10. Now, the opposite of division is obviously multiplication, but just like we talked about inverse fractions, if I had a 1/6 over here, the inverse fraction of that would be 6 over 1. And when we do this, you get 6 over 6, and when you simplify, it is obviously 1. So that is the inverse fraction that we've been talking about in past units. Now, when we go about doing this, we just talked about in front of all variables that there is a number. We just don't write it. So 1m or m would be how you represent that variable. Either way works. But always assume that there is a 1 in front of a variable. Okay? So moving forward, the opposite operation of a division problem would be to multiply. And to multiply this, to get the 6 off of this side of the equation, you take the inverse fraction, which that is not it. This is it. There we go. Sorry, guys. Okay, so you have 6 over 1 times m over 6. Now, how does that cancel? Well, you would eventually have 6m over 6, and that's where those cancel. Anything, a 1m over 1 would be your next one. So just to make this clear, what you would get here is you get 6m over 6 equals 10. Now we're not done yet, right? So these two would cancel. And what did we not do over here yet? We have not multiplied it by 6. And some of you are probably saying, why aren't you multiplying it by 6 over 1? Because 6 over 1 is the same as just 6. Now moving down, we balanced it, we've done it on both sides. This m is now isolated by itself, and 10 times 6 is 60. Again, you're asking yourself, well, how does that make sense? How can we check this? Let's plug this 60 in for this m. So we have m over 6, which is 60 over 6 equals 10. 60 divided by 6 would give us 10. So that's where that works, okay? So I'm going to erase this, and you guys can rewind it if you need to. And we're going to move on to this next one. We have k divided by 5 equals 11. Your inverse operation here would give us 5 over 1. And since we were dividing, we were multiplying. And whatever you do to one side, you do the other. So we're going to multiply by 5 as well on this side. Again, I could do 5 over 1. It's the same thing. Okay? Now when I do this, I get 5k over 5, which cancels the 5. And you have your variable by itself. Hopefully I'm not in the way during this. I didn't think about like my shoulder. But we cancel that. 11 times 5 would be 55. So 11 times 5 is 55 here. With that being said, guys, I'm going to have you guys do this. I'm going to have you do the same exact process as you did before. Watch this video as many times as you need to. Ask me questions as you go forward. And then I have the practice problems in the book and on Google Forms. Now, you're probably wondering, why do I have them in 2 different places? If you want to do them in the book first, you can definitely do them in the book. I have them listed on Google Classroom for you. But for me to be able to see if you're doing these questions right, I have them linked on Google Forms so they get sent to me so I can kind of see where you're at. Now, that's not saying that you can't fix your problems. It's not like you're locking in your grade or anything like that. You can do your quiz. You can see, oh, darn it, I got a 5 out of 8. Let me go back and fix these 3. I want you to see which ones you did wrong, and I want you to be able to fix those. So please do that. That'll be what you're doing today, and tomorrow it'll be a very similar thing as before. Of course, I would love to hear about your weekends as well. So please keep that in mind. With that being said, again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I have my phone hooked up to my email, so I should be able to see that right away. I have my iPad. I have my Chromebook. I'm at school. I'm at home. I'm home with Calvin. So I'm kind of everywhere, but I will make sure that I acknowledge your email or whatever it might be, and we can move forward. A really cool thing is we might be doing a video conference just to kind of try it out here. But if I can see your side and see like what issues you're having live, we might be doing something called Google Meet, MEET. It's something you can download on your iPad. It's something that you should have already on your Chromebook if you have a Chromebook. I don't know if you can have it on your smartphone or not, but check it out, okay? All right. Thanks, guys.